right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. Today we're talking about Daedra. We've done it before, we're going to do it again. I mean, I say we did it before, we did it, like, what, years ago?
Yeah,
the topic's so nice, you gotta do it twice.
Yeah.
it was the second one, and it was more about, it was LJ talking about the princes.
Yeah.
We're looking at all the many and various different types of lesser Daedra this time around. It's going to be very different.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I guess, well, okay. Anyway, my name's Rotten Deadite. With me today are a bunch of people who didn't find out what order they're supposed to do things in, because I'm still not very good at this.
After how many years?
Yeah, let's not, yeah.
Selectives are a professional organization.
Casual.
Very
Yeah.
casual.
In which case, to kick things off, I am James, also known as Aramithius, pretty much everywhere.
And I am Andrew, also known as the White Guar, pretty much everywhere.
All right, I'm next.
There you
go. I'm Felix, also known as Banu Hanumasaishi.
Say that 5 times now.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, that's the point.
I guess
LJ?
I'll go next.
Yeah.
I'm the Javion Saunders, also known as Icefire Warden. Insert Bat Elf Screech here.
And I'm Michael, but you might know me as Scourgicus or Moon Sugar Leader, and I might be crazy about Khajiit.
Mm-hmm.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, for those of you who are experiencing buffering right now, at least you're seeing something, because I've been losing my power all day today. So, yeah, we're going to find out what happens. It's this new thing that Georgia Power's been doing to me now, where every time it rains, they shut my power off, which is nice. Yeah, it's nice. In 90-degree weather. I don't mind. Anywho. Okay. So what we're doing is we're talking about Daedra, but we're not talking about the Daedric Princes so much today. I mean, I'm sure they're going to come up, but because we can't stay on topic. But what we're mostly trying to talk about today, what we're going to try and focus on today, is the lesser Daedra, which I keep wanting to call Daedroth, but I don't think that's right.
No.
Okay.
I mean, Daedroth is the singular form, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, because there are Daedroths, the crocodile or alligator-headed motherfuckers. But then, I'm sure they probably have like some alternative name.
Yeah, obviously.
But they haven't appeared anywhere else since the Elder Scrolls 3, I don't think. I can't remember them being...
Alligator?
They're in Oblivion. They're in ESO.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in ESO, yeah.
Okay.
But I know for a fact
I
I put an axe into one of them in ESO, so, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
So they have been around.
Yep.
Yeah, if we're talking about Daedra in terms of the non-Daedric princes, I also want to really emphasize for the viewers who are watching this live and for those who will eventually watch on YouTube, that we can't just think of all Daedra as universally bad or evil.
Mm-hmm.
There's many different shades of that, but I want to be sure that we establish that first. It's not like, oh, they all look so weird, they're demons. Like, no, just get that idea out of your mind. Just
absolutely. They're probably best explained as being the natural, I guess, native inhabitants of a realm of oblivion, which theoretically means, depending on who you ask, might also mean that the Daedra are the manifestations of the will of their of the prince who spawned them. But we get kind of contradicting information every once in a while about that. Like, for example, some Daedra seem to be the native inhabitants of multiple planes of oblivion.
Right.
Some Daedra do not claim any... Well, okay. That some Daedra do not claim any loyalty to a particular prince does not necessarily mean they did not come from a particular prince's realm or influence. But that's just sort of, I imagine, the risk that you run when you're not, a full-blown Amaranth. Or when you are a full-blown, I guess, because it goes that way too. Never mind.
Yes, it does.
when you give things will, you have to understand, like free will, you have to kind of run the risk that they're going to tell you to go fuck yourself. That's just sort of how it goes.
But why would they? to be frank. The whole Daedra print. That's kind of what I was thinking into why this is a contradiction, because you've got the Dremora who have been known to serve at least 3 princes, as far as I'm aware. But these are things that are made out of the being of a prince. So. And they explicitly made it out of themselves so as not to lose bits of themselves, which is very, very odd. And then you get the entirely unaligned stuff, like flame atronachs, who apparently inhabit Infernus exclusively, if we're to believe that text. So, with that sort of a backdrop, can we really say that they're definitely manifestations of Daedric Princes? I honestly don't think they are.
No, I would say no, because I mean we have the Ekata, the original spirits. We have Ada, they're just spirits, right? I would figure the lesser Daedra are Ada, but not Ekata. So Felix, mute your shit.
Felix.
All right, hang on.
There he goes.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, so I mean, there are all these legions and legions of lesser Daedra who, I mean, now there may be some Daedra who are born of other princes and maybe created from their essence, but I don't think that's that. I think that's more the exception than the rule.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why they have this will. Some may go, hey, Molag Bal over here, he's really powerful. I'm going to serve him, and I'm going to gain and power myself doing that. Then maybe I'll cut ties with him and I'll jump over to Azura or something. I mean, they all have their own machinations that they're doing. I mean, I really kind of think of it in a way similar to how Dungeons and Dragons handles devils, for example. You got lemures. They're the lowest of the low. They're barely sentient, and hey, if they serve really well, then hey, they get bumped up the chain of command. They become something else until they're Galbrazu or a pit fiend or something along those lines, right? Just based on the hierarchy. And so I kind of like to apply that idea to the Daedra. So say you've got a scamp or something similar at the very bottom rungs, and then hey, maybe he becomes a Bane King, and then maybe a Spider Daedra or something like that. I mean, I couldn't tell you what the actual hierarchy is, and it may differ from prince to prince based on service.
But that also gets kind of weird too, because, like I said, you may go back to Battlespire. Pretty much almost every single species of Daedra kind of have their own hierarchy internally.
Yeah.
Like the Scamps, for example. Like, that's why I kind of dislike the fact that the Scamps don't talk anymore, because they're actually fucking intelligent. They know how to speak to you.
Yeah.
They actually can comprehend what you're saying, and they actually have a matriarchal society, and their leaders are female, and they actually look more human than the Scamps normally do. And I think you have the Hern and the Morphied Daedra that actually are part of the Scamp clan or whatever, because they all kind of share the same physical traits and everything, but they had Spire Daedra, and they all refer to each other as different clans and species. So I don't think they actually morph into each other. More like they all just kind of have their own set family units.
Well, I mean, I kind of think of the Dremora, the kin. They have their various almost military-like hierarchy, right? You've got the Kinval and all the way. I mean, I don't know if Xivkyn would count in that, because there's a cross between Dremora and Civilized.
Heresy.
But that's what it says in ESO at least.
Yeah, but I seem to remember seeing something about the Dremora absolutely hating the Xivkyn and seeing them as scum.
Oh yeah. Maybe I don't know. But I mean, it seems to me, at least with the Dremora and yeah, maybe this could apply to other species if that's what we want to call them. I feel like it's most pronounced in the Dremora. You got the churls at the very bottom. They usually aren't very heavily armored, and they've got the cheap seat weapons, and then you as you go up the chain of command, and you've got your dread Dremora lords or whatever. and that may be based on service or merit or brutality, maybe, again, depending on the prince, whatever those requirements are for navigating the chain of command there.
Their hierarchy gets even weirder once you realize that Dremora pretty much, their armor is pretty much just them wearing like lesser people than themselves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, Dremora metal.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
You're a piece of shit. I'm turning you into my sword.
Yeah.
I kind of want to write that down.
Isn't that what those
a little bit?
Isn't that what those kind of the chests are when you go into the Deadlands? In Oblivion, the kind of the tables that they're supposedly lesser Daedra who've done something very wrong, and so they've been made into a table as punishment.
Yeah. Well, they've been made into a table by a Daedric Prince or by another significantly more powerful Daedra. It's like orders of discernible power, but it's also. It also sort of like it lends some credence to the idea that these are entities that are not native to Daedric planes, but rather Oblivion in general.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so here's the thing, right? Ultimately, all a Daedra is a different kind of spirit that had no part in the creation of Mundus, right? Like at the end of the day, that's kind of that's the basic part, right? So you have all these smaller, lesser spirits that buggered off, and those became the tiny holes in the night sky, and those are the Magna Gi.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the other Daedra who were the other spirits who were just hanging out saying, okay, so that was weird, but I'm still just here doing my little Daedra thing. And so that's why there's different scales, right? Like if the Aedra are, to quote the Altmer belief, if they are our ancestors and they're the biggest, best of the ancestors and we all descend from them, then it's kind of like the sort of mirror version of that with the Daedra, that you have all the great Daedric princes, but you also have various lesser Daedra who are just like, yeah, I'm just some random spirit. It's Oblivion. Same rules don't apply here. So I can have wings and not serve a master, or I'll choose to serve a master. Like there's a bit more complexity and fluidity with the Daedra than there are, say, with the races of Man and Mare.
Yeah. No, that absolutely I see that as kind of the way it has to make sense. That it has to make sense that way. Otherwise, all the various kind of liminal bits to get the kind of like Farnuit Hen, who kind of aligns himself with, I think, is it Clavicus Vile? But maybe
sort of.
But maybe on a good day, but sometimes not. I don't see the politics of Oblivion being possible otherwise.
Sorry, I'm just imagining like that latest joke that's going around where it's like, felt cute, might worship Molag Bal later.
Yeah.
Right.
I always seen the Daedra as like the living embodiment of the phrase "Mom, it's my turn on the Xbox now." That's pretty much what they did.
That's what I've said about Mehrunes Dagon in the past.
Mom says it's my turn with that Tamriel.
Mom says it's my turn with Mundus now.
Yeah, if I can't have it, no one can. Smash.
Yeah, and Mehrunes Dagon is the kind of guy who throws controllers into walls. Yeah.
Oh, a Dark Souls player. Yeah.
I
mean,
yeah. But but it is. I mean, it's easy to conclude that Daedra in general are just entities or spirits that are still involved with, or are still fascinated for some reason with Mundus. And according to the differing levels of power, you see a differing manifestation as such. But there are apparently cultures of some Daedra, for example, I think it's pronounced Xivkyn, are capable, or seem to allude to something that appears to be like a culture of some sort. I think there were clans at one point.
Yeah.
I recently replayed Cold Harbor in ESO, and there is I think she's a Dremora that you meet. And one of the other Dremora had done something to her clan, and it sounds like they were killed, I don't know if this means that they were permanently relegated to the waters of oblivion. I'm not completely sure, but she wanted revenge, and you can help her to get it. So there are definitely clans or even families on some level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we ran into any Daedra children.
Not that I've ever seen.
Yeah, me neither.
Oh, wait for Elder Scrolls 6.
Children.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you never know.
That's assuming they do
Yeah.
kids in Elder Scrolls 6, which...
But they kind of have to be children on some level, or at least things that come into existence at some. They have to be contingent, because the Xivkyn, if I remember rightly, they were pretty much created as part of a breeding program. Almost, they were kind of Dremora and something.
Really?
Yeah, that's the impression I got.
I don't remember that at all.
I could be wrong, but sorry. Oh, Xivkyn. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm talking at cross purposes. But yeah, the Xivkyn were created through some sort of a breeding program, which makes me think that there's some process of making new Daedra, even if they don't appear to be children in the way that we understand it, which I think is possibly something to do with how Oblivion works with time, or doesn't.
Or doesn't, yeah.
Time within Oblivion is very, very optional. So, you've just got people opting to be fully mature as pretty much as soon as they exist, because they can.
Right.
It's also in. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
I mean, when we're talking about like the breeding bit, I mean, I would almost relegate that to like mimic experiments. Like, hey, let's fuck with your name. Let's see what happens. Hey, let's take we're gonna take this part of like a Xivkyn mimic, and we're gonna apply that descriptor to your mimic. What happens?
Mm-hmm.
And then but we're gonna keep like the kin part. Like what happens? And then here we go.
Name splicing.
And I mean, maybe that's informed a little bit by stuff like Kill 6 Billion Demons, which people in
love that.
It's names are so important. I feel like that's a really cool way to deal with it. So it's a little more fluid and metaphorical than just biological, right? But it manifests itself biologically.
It actually reminds me of one of the Lore Master archives with Lyric the Fool Killer, which the Dremora that Michael brought up. And we already know that there was two different kinds of mimics. You had the one that a Daedra was born with, and you had the one that they later on chose for themselves. And if I'm remembering correctly, it's actually pretty neat, because this is actually an example of a piece of fan lore that actually got kind of officialized by the Sir Legolas from USP. He brought up the idea that Lyrit has a payload mimic or something like that. And it's basically a name that Daedra is not the one they're born with, it's not the one they choose, but it's the one that they inherit, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically malleable. It's not like one that, it always is in flux, pretty much. And
are we talking about a sort of like a fate or a dharma kind of a thing?
Yeah, kind of like that. And it reminded me of, and earlier I was going to bring up the fact that in Oblivion, the game, when you gotta go and fight that Xivkyn or that one Dremora dude who becomes like your best friend, he's like, hey, well, the Xivkyn are like kind of like our big brothers in a sense, or he says something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Daedra do actually feel each other as kind of familiar units, which I think is, makes sense, because also in Battlespire there's a book called Spirit of the Daedra or something like that, where they described, I think as the princess basically conquered Oblivion, and they basically went around like, hey, you guys, come help us. You guys, come help us. Everyone, come fucking help us. We're going to like conquer some realms and shit. So it makes sense that kind of like maybe during when chaos, like Oblivion was like still super chaotic, when Mundus and everything before it, like right after it got created. Maybe the reason why the Daedric Princes weren't around is because they were basically just going through Oblivion, like, hey, we want to make this place a better place to live at, kind of ish. Maybe don't ask questions.
Don't ask for specifics. Just get in line.
Yeah.
It's like, get in the realm, loser. We're going hunting.
Yeah. And I think, let's see. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to separate my impression of the Lesser Daedra from just like let's build an asset and make it a monster and throw it out there. But it does seem like that ESO in particular has done some pretty serious, or at least more serious than usual. I'm sorry, excuse me. Okay. Has done a more serious dive than than you generally get into the idea of Daedric culture. So if anybody's interested in getting into that, that's a game you're gonna have to pick up if you haven't already. And for the love of God, and that's also your mileage may vary depending on which starting area you start in, which seems to change every time they put out an expansion. What else did anybody else want to talk about? Because this is definitely not my area.
Daedric Lords.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
are we talking like demi princes or?
Well, it's a really weird topic because they were introducing Battlespire to look like regular humans wearing armor and shit. But the term pops up a lot in regards to Daedric Lord. At least not like a lot, but very often. And from what I can gather, Daedric Lord is basically a powerful Daedra that's not a prince, but they're giving domain over something in Oblivion. We know that there's a Daedric Lord of fishing. It's like Hyacinth's like either son or his I don't know, hunting partner or whatever.
Shik talked about him. Daedric Lord of fishing. Yeah, good times.
Got Hollow Jack, the fucking Halloween dude. You also have Vanu Hin, who's also a Daedric Lord. So it's like I don't want to just assume that they're all demi princes because, I mean, that'd be kind of just mad. But it's a very interesting political title for a person in Oblivion, apparently.
Well, I mean, if in Glenumbra in ESO, you encounter a Dremora Lord who has manifested himself as a tree and he's posing as the bad man. Who I believe is Shior.
Shior, yep.
Yeah. So is that actually Shior, or is it just a Dremora Lord, playing identity theft? I mean, but he has thoughts. But he has his own plane that formed as the roots of this tree, which is himself. And so in these roots, I mean, it's a pretty terribly finite plane, but I mean, owning a plane would be one of the main prerequisites of being a demi prince, in my opinion. Whether
I get that,
whether it's shaved off of someone else's plane and influence, or if it's kind of a bubble that you kind of created in the negative space between other planes, that makes you a demi prince. So,
although, like, okay, so for me anyway, the idea of things like Shor, Shior, Lorcan, Alkosh, Akatosh, all these variations of the same pillar of the pantheon, as it were, makes just to me kind of feels like that is a unique god for that culture. So Alkosh is not Akatosh, Shior is not Shor, Sheogorath is not Sheogorath. Like there are differences relevant to each culture because each individual culture is upholding that version. It may be like a different facet of that same kind of being, but it's through the different. It's either through the different lens of observation, or it's like a separate deity that has their own plane of existence. So yeah, sure, there might only really be whatever it is, like 16 or 17 Daedric Lords, but there might be like 812 realms of Oblivion. You know what I mean?
Okay, I've got lore about this.
Oh, so okay, here we go.
This was actually a subject back when I was working on Beyond Skyrim Elsewhere. This was a subject that we thought a lot about because there are. I'm not gonna talk about this at length because I'll be here for 6 hours and everybody will get bored. But there's a lot of confusion about the nature of Azura, because the Azura we meet in Daggerfall is a Breton, and she's vain and kind of really not very nice and not terribly articulate either. The Azura we meet in Morrowind is a Dunmer and radically different. Okay, I mean, there's still some vanity stuff in there, but she's a very different kind of Daedra, and she's a little more motherly in Oblivion and in Skyrim. Well, of course, the Khajiit believe in Azura as well. So what's going on there? So we had to kind of figure out what was going on. And I wish Mac McGee was here, because he and I had a great talk. And kind of where we landed was this, that, okay, let me see if I can put this together in a way that's going to make sense. The Daedra are a palette for mortal epistemology.
Okay.
Because they get changed through mythopoesis, right? But you don't change the Daedra. You are the palette for the Daedra. The Daedra affect you, and depending on the way in which the Daedra affect you, you can perceive them differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
In short,
I really like that.
I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely fun. I mean, it's not the explanation that I've always kind of operated with up here. I kind of think of each Etata kind of as a polyhedral die, right? You got like a D12, right? So depending on
they all have different facets.
Yeah. So while they are different sides, the 1 is not the same as the 11 on a D12, but they are the same object.
Right.
They just present themselves differently. And I mean, there's no way to really represent this in a 3-dimensional way, but a lot of those facets can overlap and maybe are part of other dice as well. And so that's where we get a lot of overlap with things like Tawaka, who overlaps with, I think, both RK and
Exorcies.
And yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of overlap when you go from culture to culture. And so while we can simplify it and say, oh, well, these deities are one-to-one representations, it's really not the case. But for simplicity's sake in how we verbalize that, I mean, I think of them as that way. And which side of the die are we looking at? Are we looking at the 1? Are we looking at the 3, at the 12? I don't know. That's, maybe those distinctions are arbitrary.
And there are different dice that share numbers.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like that's generally how I viewed it as well. But I also really like the idea that Michael was putting down.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the ideas work together. I think, because maybe if you're a Breton, you roll a 6 on that die 12, right? But a Khajiit might roll, I don't know, a 9 or something like that.
Or maybe Khajiit's rolling a D6 and rolls a 6.
Yeah.
It's just that the different bits from the different the things that matter to the observer and therefore affect the way that the Daedra are seen will be similar between the different entities. Yeah. So you're going to have some conceptual overlap with that model, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I mean that's the explanation that I use to justify why these different cultural approximations are different. They are distinctly different entities, but they are the same entity. So while it's also I guess what's what I'm looking for here? I hate when I can't remember words. It's counterintuitive and oxymoronic a little bit. It's
contradictory.
Yeah, maybe. Paradoxical.
Paradoxical.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's kind of paradoxical, but I mean, thinking about it as a die, that it kind of works.
Yeah.
So, no, I like it.
It's also, I think, something to do with how the Daedra want to present themselves. If you look at Fanuit Hen, how he's talked about things, he's deliberately laid out Maelstrom to be in a particular way, to be appealing.
He's specifically taken on the form of a Bosmer because lulz, I guess. I don't remember.
Felt cute might be a Bosmer later.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, weird.
But it's that idea of they then shape themselves to fit whatever perceptions they think will best work. But maybe that's only something that the greater Daedra can do, because you were talking about the gradations of the lesser Daedra earlier, kind of progressing from being one type of entity to another. I don't think have we seen any indication of that actually being possible?
I don't think so. I mean, that's largely headcanon on my part. Just going off of D&D. I mean, a lot of my fantasy roots are in D&D, so that's kind of my fallback for things.
Fair dues.
Yeah, I think like the closest thing we see is something like that is with Cognition actually with ESO, and it's implied that almost all Daedric Princes are naturally imperfect due to the fact that they're not full Daedra, because Cognition actually has memory problems.
Yeah.
And he has to, like, his tutor has to literally, like, put his memories into different forms so he can actually remember shit. And I think that's actually a pretty interesting idea, because it implies that, the chaotic, naturally immortal, like, I am eternal kind of nature of the Daedra just doesn't click right with whatever, the other half of that Daedric Prince comes from.
Or he's like a fighter who's been punched in the head too many times.
Exactly. They literally can't live long enough to their immortality can't comprehend the amount of memories they can store.
Yeah, that's kind of keys in with some of the things that you were that got mentioned earlier about a Daedra's Dharma. That I think that's a helpful way of thinking about it, particularly if you look at how I think the book is Spirit of the Daedra, how that book puts it forward, and that the scamp have simple thoughts, and another type of Daedra have no thoughts, and that kind of those kind of different species barriers that limit cognition mean that Daedra are only capable of certain things, but in the chaos of Oblivion, you could wind up basically being promoted beyond your competence level. That could almost be what's happened to Fanuit Hen in this case. That what happens when you push a Daedra into being something that they're not capable of being. Which I think there must be some sort of experimentation going on there, and some flexibility. There's, as much as the Daedra are self-contained in a way that the Aedra and potentially the Magna Gi, I don't know, aren't. They definitely aren't entirely self-aware, according to that way of thinking. And I've lost my train of thought at this point. But they would kind of in order to push beyond their own boundaries, they would kind of have to not know what those boundaries are, really.
Like it kind of makes me wonder about, because I've a very pointed line in Spirits of the Daedra where they talk about like how the different Daedra had different thoughts and everything. The Jamora who wrote it actually points out that every Daedra, like, pretty much unanimously both respect and fear mortality, due to the fact that mortals don't fear the inability of death. Or Daedra don't actually understand the concept of death, which is really interesting, because you don't really see the Daedra ever actually kind of admit that, oh yeah, mortals are kind of cool a little bit. But in this book, he points out that we don't understand how you guys don't fucking aren't afraid of dying. How is that possible?
Man is mortal and doomed to death and failure and loss. This lies beyond their comprehension. Why do you not despair?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's always a good quote.
Which also implies that the Dremora, at least, have a pretty extensive view of time. You've not got that they see all time as one thing, which again reinforces the whole idea of, well, time is optional in Oblivion. That if even the lesser Daedra can't really comprehend why death isn't this instant stop, then there's less of a perception filter out there for Daedra. There's less stopping them from understanding what's quote really going on in terms of how the world works, maybe.
Well, you've got like this is unfortunately one of the problems with fantasy settings in general is that when you start talking about entities that have extraordinarily long lives, like elves that can live 1,000 years, and or Daedra that seem to if you kill one, it just sort of fades away and then comes back in again, and there doesn't seem to be a loss or any dramatic loss of any kind. The problem is that the only way for us to think about how they perceive their environment or how they perceive mortals or how they would perceive our perception of time is to assign a psychology to them that is defined by mortal psychology, by human psychology, and for that matter, by real world psychology, not fantasy psychology. Because again, one of the other problems with the Elder Scrolls universe is that we don't even know for sure that things like air exist or gravity or something like that.
I would assume air does exist since you can drown.
Yeah, but but at the same time, air exists in the void. Apparently, the problem is that you just forget how to breathe it. So
because of, I don't know, oblivion, something, memory, something.
Right. So the problem is that you have when you start talking about how Daedra view humans. You pretty much have to do it through the lens of the documents they've given us and the statements that they've provided, because otherwise, the moment you start to hypothesize about them, you run into the problem of, well, yeah, but they're not human.
We do know that they're at least trustworthy sources, because if you actually pay attention to all the games, Daedra don't actually lie. There's never been a Daedra that's actually straight up lied to you. Except maybe
to the player, maybe, but I mean, they do it all the time to humans.
Clavicus Vile.
Yeah.
Well, that's a Daedric Prince, and his whole thing is lying.
That's true.
Well, although it's not necessarily lying either, is it? It's just misleading.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I said there's never been a Daedra that's actually lied to you. They just don't tell you the full truth, or they just give you
Sorry.
the way.
Wait, no, hang on. Heresy time. There is one potential Daedra who lied. Lorcan.
Lorcan's an asshole, so remember that.
Well, I mean, so then how do we think about the princes like Mephala and Boethia, who part of their spheres is deceit? I mean, lying is like their whole deal. I mean, if we take Fire and Darkness, the lore book, seriously, where it talks about how the Night Mother is in fact Mephala. Mephala's just lying about who she is, but the Dark Brotherhood also knows that it's Mephala, and they just kind of roll with this Night Mother thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Morag Tong has turned their backs on Mephala, and they're now worshipping Vivek instead. Right?
Yeah, I think LJ, I think, our interactions, especially in Oblivion, we have a lot of interactions with Dremora, and they do tend to not lie and to be a little more honest. But I mean, I guess it depends on which sphere. I think some spheres of some princes are definitely, as Andrew said, much more based on deception. But no, I kind of feel like there are definitely lies.
I mean, I guess, what is it that Jack Sparrow says about trust? Like, you can always trust you can always trust a dishonest man to be dishonest. It's the honest ones you got to look out for.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Yeah.
So it's, I guess that leads back to something I've always thought, is that the princes are, they're slaves to their nature, which for Molag Bal is an irony. They do what they do because they must. They can't do anything but that. And
I actually disagree with that.
Yeah.
Because Bal starts to change in the sermons. Vivek comes back and finds his body used.
Yeah, but
but that could be Vivek being Vivek, and Vivek is a known.
Well, this is a fair point. Yeah.
I mean, Is it Molag Bal who's changing, or is it Vivek who's changing?
Yeah, that's exactly what I would argue. Is it's Vivek's perception of Molag Bal that's changed. Yeah,
that's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I feel that we kind of have to give the Daedra the capacity to change themselves. Otherwise, the politic again. I come back to this phrase, the politics of oblivion. I'm just in love with the coincidence guild.
Yeah.
But anyway, but how does oblivion politics work if natures can't be changed, if courses and behavior can't be adjusted? Because otherwise everyone will do what they would do anyway, and nothing would change. But the way that oblivion is presented is as something that's ever shifting and is mutable and is always in flux, which is only really possible if you can change, if you can start adjusting what you are and what you do.
So I have a heresy. So I do think that the Daedra are capable of change, whether we're talking about lesser Daedra probably to a lesser degree, but the princes definitely, because they are change, right? And if they can't change, if Molag Bal is a slave to his nature, then that's stasis, and that's anuic, and that's antithetical. So instead of thinking of it in static terms as stasis and change, I would say that, I don't know about this is true for the Daedra, but definitely for the Daedra are in a process of individuation. And that's why they're fascinated with the other, which in this case would be Mundus.
Right.
Yeah.
That's got me thinking about a lot of stuff. Like, are Daedra therefore all Daedra maybe growing out of Mundus, sort of like, I don't know, like spores off of a fungus, kind of like.
I dig it.
Like there's.
We know
that's the hist.
It makes spores have a little more of a connotation. You know, I mean, we got mesospores and relationships with moths and.
Oh, I figured out moths, by the way. For those of you playing Selectives Lorecast Bingo, now's the time where you tick off the Carl Jung box.
I still got to finish that. That bingo card.
I've got
Christy and I are on the cast together, so we have to talk about Jung at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, and again, welcome to the fucking Selectives Lorecast, everybody. I was going to bring up psychology here for a little bit about how it is also possible, right, that in the sense of the Daedra being agents of change, is that rightly their nature and or their spheres are allowed to change as well, because they retain the sort of power and ability to do so by not adhering to the laws that created Mundus. They were a part of that. That's why they are the Daedra. So if you want to look at that from a really meta standpoint, as the dream of the Godhead, then the Daedra are kind of slowly but surely coming to grips with the nature of reality and existence and what that ultimately means in relation to the dreamer.
Yeah, as they're beginning to develop their own ability to understand their existence in a sort of like a self-awareness. As their self-awareness is growing, they're beginning to realize sort of the inevitable conclusion that you get from existence in general and self-awareness, which is that, something has to be aware of a thing before it can exist and function. And therefore something has to be aware of the entire universe.
That also kind of explains on a really weird level a lot of the Daedric Princes, like basically what they've been trying to do in like almost every game, because you had Dagon who wanted to take over Tamriel, you had Molag Bal who wanted to merge Mundus with Oblivion, and then you had Nocturnal who literally was trying to combine all aspects of herself across alternate timelines into one being. She's basically trying to become the singularity. So it basically implies that the Daedric Princes on some level are trying to Amaret themselves. But, they just can't, or we just fucking them over and telling them no.
Well, they're doing it wrong, is what they're doing.
Yeah,
They're
they haven't yet figured it out.
Well, they're doing it wrong because they're not doing it from love.
And just thinking on the psychology train here, I may be horribly misusing the term, but could we think of the princes, at least, and possibly the lesser Daedra as well, in terms of how they act? Is it something similar to borderline personality disorder, which is, as I understand it, kind of fluxes depending on quite who you're speaking to and what sort of context, but has no real grounding in and of itself? I don't know precisely, but...
Oh, are you thinking of dissociative personalities? Or dissociative disorders? Okay.
Not that severe. But it's basically that you've not got a stable enough personality, which could also explain why the different perceptions between the cultures go. Because when Azura is with the Khajiits, she's like this, but when she's with the Dunmer, she's like this, simply because that's the way she is.
Uh-huh.
That reminds me of Coda a little bit.
Yeah.
You know how
there's another
is
bingo
looking
box.
at but it reminds me of when Jabal is looking at his fucking words, but the little astrology thing is a little planetarium, pretty much.
Yes.
And there's 16 planets surrounding Mundus, but there's no the Daedra planets aren't there, and it always headcanon, personally, that when Coda, when Landfall shit went down, the Daedra were trying to, pull everything back together. The Daedra were kind of like, you know what, fuck it, we'll give ourselves to at least stabilize some shit, which is why they're not around. And I always kind of wonder if the Daedra always felt sorry for not actually contributing to Mundus, so in their own little way, by being there and always causing some shit, they're helping mortals out.
Because that's the thing. They like being able to mess around with mortals.
Yeah,
that's the whole
they
point.
do. But there's you already have Boito, which is a prime example of being Lorcan's biggest fangirl, and you have Malakath too. Depending on which story you do, the orc story is actually pretty fucking well done. He basically he feels so bad for betraying Lorcan, he basically just rips all his shame out. It's like, fuck it, going to oblivion.
I'm sorry, but when you talked about Boethia as the #1 fan, the first thing that came to my mind was, notice me, Lorcan senpai, uwu.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Oh, definitely. That's what
boy.
Doing.
This is how fan fiction gets started. I was actually thinking of Boethia as Lorcan's biggest fan, but
oh no, we've already made a list of the Daedra and Daedra as a high school drama.
Yeah,
that's right.
Great.
Yes,
they're all teenagers just fucking trying to play the same game.
Yeah. Oh God, I remember that post I made to the official Bethesda forums about the Daedra as a teen drama.
Wasn't Azura like the fucking cheerleader?
Something like that.
Fucking loud as fuck.
Lorcan was like the cool kid. The reject was like, "Hey guys, you want to make a Mundus?" And
Yeah. Hermaeus Mora was just the fucking nerd in the back reading books and.
Yeah.
Where does
Molak
Magnus
Ball's
fit in?
the jock who's like, "Bro, do you even lift?" And
yeah. Fucking Magnus is that librarian that just like nopes out at the end.
Okay. Azura, but played by Molly Ringwald.
Okay. Are you going to do an impression right now? Is that where you're gearing up to, or?
We're talking Breakfast Club here.
Yeah, exactly.
Magnus says, "Oh, I could have some fun Morehouse things, but you mess with the bowl, you get the horns."
Yeah.
Yeah. Lorcan's the dude is like, at
the end he's like,
we digress entirely.
Basically convention, but it's Saved by the Bell.
Who's Screech? Is that,
Julia. All right. Okay. Oh God! Please, somebody get my head out of 80s teen movies.
Coincidence Guild. What is it?
The Coincidence Guild.
Yes.
Well, okay. So in the 36 Lessons, the Coincidence Guild is theoretically Daedra, but it really is supposed to represent a conceptual argument between Vivek and culture and the general culture at large. It's the reason why they're assigned the embodiment of Daedra is because they're supposed to be powerful, and Vivek knows who his audience is. So it's about Vivek saying, it's about Vivek sort of anthropomorphizing the concept of arguing for coincidence or chaos or randomness, and then having to defeat that opponent, and so therefore it suits Vivek's narrative to create the Coincidence Guild as an organization that Z has to that Z has to defeat in an argument, which is of course that if there is such a thing as all-powerful deities, coincidence cannot exist. Because if everything is part of God's plan and God has planned out absolutely everything to the most minute detail, then you have no free will. And part of the whole argument that Vivek has for the idea of mortals becoming gods is that free will exists, and it's part of the in general it's part of the sort of the thelemetic philosophy of divinity within everyone and do as thou wilt and all that kind of stuff. Is the Coincidence Guild a bunch of Daedra? Yeah, probably. Stick around in ESO long enough, they'll show up. But in the purpose that they serve for the 36 lessons, the answer would be who gives a shit.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Which, I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of like that's kind of like the big disadvantage of delving so heavily into philosophy and metaphysics in the 36 lessons is it becomes very difficult to interpret it in an in-game, which in an in-game light, which is kind of what I'm supposed to be fucking doing. So, but we're in the weeds right now in Sermon 21. So,
oh boy,
yeah. So we're really. We've hit the hard stuff with Vivek's children right now, so that's kind of why we're still doing as much research as we had. That's why I was reading the Psychology of the Unconscious by Carl Jung on a plane on the way to Boston last week or the week before, was because that's what I'm fucking doing.
That's good times, man.
Yeah,
that's good times.
It was that or studying for a Magento certification, so might as well read Jung. Anyway, the interesting idea that one of the things that I found that was interesting about the idea of the Coincidence Guild was just the general idea that that they are not a construction of Vivek, a narrative construction that Vivek created for the 36 lessons, but rather the idea that there are Daedra or clans of Daedra or organizations or cultures or whatever of Daedra that just walk around and exist purely for the sake of argument, that the sort of
that.
like intellectual positions manifest into organizations or individuals, which I absolutely love the idea of in a general sort of world building metaphysics sense of, does this mean that you have the Coincidence Guild? Does this mean you're going to have the individualization guild? Are you going to have the a service through submission guild? Are you going to have that kind of stuff? And in a sort of like in the spirit of the 36 lessons, I think it's a great idea because in the 36 lessons, metaphysical is reality. So, but as far as a great way to confuse the shit out of your players, I think it's probably not going to end up in a video game.
No. Just a thought then for that just kind of struck me. If the Daedra are so focused on Mundus and even to the extent the lesser Daedra, are organizations like the Coincidence Guild, assuming that they're actually a thing, the Daedra's way, and particularly the lesser Daedra's way, because that implies a lot of them grouping together and organizing whatever, is that their way of understanding Mundus is this kind of like the coincidence working group to try and figure out how it works.
It's a research breakout group. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I love that. That's a great idea. Yeah, that's really great. Yeah. And then somebody like Vivek comes along and proves them wrong, and instead of them dissolving or something like that, they just walk into a corner and like write stuff down and put their heads together and go, very interesting. We may have to reassess.
I have a sudden image. I've been rereading Harry Potter, and I have a sudden image of Mr. Weasley and starting a work group to try to figure out blenders. Right,
yeah.
And that there is somewhere there is a Daedric guild dedicated to I don't know, Breton cooking implements or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the purpose of a ladle?
Yeah.
Right.
Up in the chalkboard in big text it says, "Why is butter?"
Yes. I believe in this.
Fucking Daedric academies for mortal relationships.
I can dig that. Yeah.
I need a DLC. Come on, dog.
Which is, and you think that, and then you look at I was summoned by a mortal as an instruction manual.
Oh my god! I just realized something. Welcome to Cooking with Creepers.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
or of course the number one best-selling Daedric book of all time, How to Serve Man.
Although, okay, so like to pull on an earlier thread that you were mentioning with the verse for Daedra, a thought occurred to me. Does the idea of where your ideology is your skin apply to Daedra?
Ooh.
I mean, kinda. Literally, they wear each other as skin.
Well, I mean, if you extend the idea of skin to be the physical form you take, then maybe?
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
If they are expressions of their own nature, which then, if we go and Gaster to the whole kind of they inspired certain things with it, then I think absolutely that they're kind of they are the embodiments of them, and them then means something specific in Mundus. I'm not sure if that's quite what you're driving at, but
I would bring this back to mimic alteration.
Okay.
Because while one individual Daedra, let's say the one AE of that Daedra, its protonymic or paleonymic has been altered in such a way that now it's something else. Its ideology has fundamentally changed, but it is still that individual, right? So it has changed in a biological sense because its name has changed and how we refer to it, how we think of it has changed.
Maybe that's why Daedra don't wear humans as armor. They just don't want to be us.
Well, would you want to be some weak, pathetic mortal that dies and returns to memory? Like, I don't know.
True.
Yeah. If wearing the skin is emulation, why would you? Oh, that tribalism and stuff is vaguely clicking into place. The whole kind of idea of cannibalism to gain your enemy's strength and that sort of thing. Would that be potentially what's going on if you were looking at Dremora wearing lesser Daedra as skin? And kind of combining lots of Daedra into one thing to make a stronger whole, a strong being.
Yeah, maybe, but also there's the constructed flesh Atronachs. No, they don't count. Never mind. No, they're not Daedra. They're just
shoved into zombie parts.
Yeah, but I was gonna say the original plan, the original concept for Daedric armor was that you were going to literally wear the husks of Daedra. And the Daedra were originally supposed to be giant-sized, like real fucking big. And the idea was that Daedric armor was you would kill, like a whole bunch of humans would kill a single Daedra and then hollow him out and wear like the head or the skull as armor. And it would be like this, it would grant them incredible power. Like just ridiculous, like the Ruddy Man, sort of like ridiculous power and ability, but it would also drive you crazy.
Yeah,
Elder Scrolls is such a fucked up fucking thing.
Huh?
It's like hey, here, wear this armor, and it's gonna make you crazy. It's like, all right, yep, let's sign off on that idea.
Well,
Well,
I don't know if
wearing-
they may not have gone with it simply because they just couldn't figure out a way to do that in game. Like, you know?
Giant Daedra kaiju fights. That'd been awesome.
Well, that would have been nice. Yeah.
You'd be wearing something that's nimically antithetical to you.
Right.
You know, I talk a lot about the Arbus
Yeah.
as a philosophical debate, right?
Mhm.
Is not, and if you're an is and you're wearing is not,
Ooh.
Yeah.
it's gonna mess you up. Oh
Right.
yeah, that's totally
Yeah.
that's how I interpret the whole thing.
Mhm.
Do you know
Yeah,
how you
but
fix
if
that, Michael?
What's
you
that?
take
Do you know how you fix that, Michael?
How do I fix that?
You wear arrow scrolls as your armor.
Well, for real.
Oh no,
right?
not this argument again.
When in doubt.
you can wear scrolls as armor. You'll still get beaten by the guy who's wearing children as armor.
Hey, if I'm wearing the Daedric prophecies as armor, I don't have to worry about fights. I'll just blink out of existence whenever I want to.
No, that's a fair argument, actually. Yeah.
I'm just imagining someone like covered in the Children of Skyrim, and it's like there's what's her name, the little angry Redguard girl in Whiterun, and she's like,
Oh, yeah,
"I'll take you on. I don't care."
Ooh.
You turn me invisible.
I kind of imagine like Nemily is like Uber for Elder Scrolls. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, sir, we have arrived at your destination. You are meant to be at this point in time. There you
You did it, man. 5 stars.
Yeah.
go. That'll be 500 septics.
3 stars. Didn't have any water bottles.
Slovankeen's brought up an interesting point about the whole idea of in King Edward. There's every mortal has their own Daedra,
Yeah.
which is apart from being hugely similar to Northern Lights and the Golden Compass. That stuff, which I just watched literally before coming on here.
What'd you think? Any good?
Not especially.
Oh,
It was
okay.
the original
Shit.
Dakota Blue thing.
Were you talking
Alright.
about like the book series or like something else?
Yeah, the book series.
Oh,
The whole idea of each human having their own Daedra. Has that ever been expanded on since? Because it's not the literal. You will have some demon to tempt you, which I think is possibly what was being driven at in King Edward.
Yeah,
But-
Screwtape letters.
Yeah, absolutely that.
I've never read anything to suggest that every human has a Daedra
Mhm.
I mean,
since King Edward, which is a sadness because that's interesting.
Yeah. Or
Well, I mean, it may have also been sort of like that sort of old-timey, like, turn of the century kind of every human's got a devil trying to tempt you over to the side of evil and to sin and so on, and it's kind of more sort of a folksy sort of, watch out, or your devil will come out and pop out from behind a rock and tempt you, and
yeah.
Although I could totally see like a subspecies of Daedra doing that,
Yes.
just for shits and giggles.
that all they do is just fuck with humans.
Have you
And...
seen the Banekin? They
Well,
sit around, they go like this, and they go, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna claim me some human souls today.
Gotta make them souls, baby. Souls make the world go round.
What do Daedra actually do with souls? On another question, I mean, there's souls that go to the various Daedric realms and fuel something.
They
Crown
eat them.
Torch.
They're energy moguls.
Yeah.
Like immortal souls,
That's
they actually eat them.
I thought it had more to do with lunar currency.
It is.
Yeah, no,
Mhm.
I'm saying it's all the same.
But what do
thing.
they buy?
Okay.
Well, who says they have to buy anything? I mean,
Unless they're just eating it, and that gives them Oblivion real estate.
I mean,
I mean-
I think of it like, so they've got like this animus, this raw life energy. Maybe they kind of store it and they have it, and they're like, okay, well, I've got all of this. This is my stockpile of energy, and this makes me more powerful because I've got this energy that I can use for whatever endeavors I'm. It's not necessarily a mercantile kind of system. It's like, oh well, I'm gonna build a giant siege machine that is gonna show up at the end of the fourth era. I gotta use some of this energy to like build that and make it materialize. Like, do we honestly think there are like Dremora architects out there like building siege machines? Because I kind of doubt it. I think the prince is like, oh, here it is, and then it's
they had wait.
Asking each other something.
Oblivion had Daedric blacksmiths, didn't it? Forges, Daedric
yes.
Forges.
Mm-hmm.
So they could literally be building stuff. Yeah, building those war machines and shit.
Maybe that's how he pays his workers.
I mean,
Yeah, but as far as why Daedra would be interested in souls, there might be a practical explanation for that, which is that Magicka leaks into Mundus through Aetherius, but it bypasses Oblivion.
Right.
So maybe the problem that Daedra have is that Oblivion does not have a natural source of Magicka. And the way they get their power, literally the way they charge their batteries, is by human souls.
Well, isn't it ESO? It's explained, or it's like not explained, but it's theorized in one of like Dr. Lupinus or whatever his books, that it's possible that Aetherius is basically poisonous to Daedra, and that one dies in Aetherius, they die for real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You die in real life. Yeah.
There's also if you go back to the idea I suggested about the Daedra in a process of individuation. Consummation of mortal souls could be like we ate it to become it type thing. Not necessarily they're trying to become mortal, but that they're using the energy of mortal souls, whatever that means, maybe Magicka, maybe whatever, I don't know, to evolve themselves. I don't know. I have to think about it.
Yeah. Does that mean that we have... Is that something that only princes can do? Do we have any instances of lesser Daedra mucking around with souls in that way? Because if we're back to the idea of Oblivion being a flexible hierarchy that you can work your way up, is that one way of doing it? I'm not. I'm not. Yeah. Although, quite how you claim souls for yourself when you're swearing fealty to a lord, unless there's some very, very feudal arrangement that you take all the stuff and you give a tithe to your one of the 16, just to keep them off your back. Which
is there's discussion. I can't remember which book it's in, but there's discussion about the Daedra that remain on the mortal. That Daedra can't remain on the mortal plane. It's the whole is not thing. But those that do have entered into a long-term pact with their summoner. Have we ever, has it ever talked about what the pact involves? I mean, if you go back to kind of classic demonology, it would be the soul of the summoner.
Yes.
Or a soul.
Well, and that's kind of something that's broached on in Morrowind's expansion, I think, in ESO. When Mistress Dratha, she makes a deal with the Dremora Lord.
Yeah.
And she says, oh, well, I want to live forever. I want to be immortal. And he says, oh, okay, well, then, at some point in the future, I will return disguised as a man, and I will claim your soul, and you'll spend the rest of eternity in Cold Harbor or wherever. And she's like, all right, cool. And so,
which is why she forbids men from her island. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I always assumed that it was kind of like the pact, even though we don't really know much about it. I always assumed that it might be possible that the Daedra basically takes that mortal's place in Mundus. Like, they basically exchange each other's nature of being. Like, basically, I don't know, that kind of implies that the Daedra kind of like was fallen this mortal enough to actually take their place, but it would make a little bit of sense that the Daedra is pretty much just like, hey, let me stay here and you can go to Oblivion and fuck off and do whatever the fuck you want, and whatever, and then we can eventually change places again. But it'll explain like that one pirate dude you meet in Skyrim. Yeah, that's like, yeah, I'm a pirate because I want to be a pirate. Yar. But some shit like that.
Yeah, it could be.
But the whole soul thing was always weird to me. That's why I brought up Lord of Souls, because in Umbrio, at least, they were literally eating souls. They were turning into food and eating the emotions and stuff like that, which was kind of interesting because that kind of implies that Daedra don't feel emotions the way humans do or mortals do. But you know, which makes sense because if they can't comprehend death, then they probably can't comprehend a lot of shit. And Balspire, they didn't even know what sex was. You know, they was repulsed by it. So,
Yeah. Well, that's even in that same book, though. They will talk about scamps not being able to feel fear, but Dremora, who are higher up beings, can feel fear and must master it, sort of thing. So that unless they mean something entirely different by the word fear, and how they're processing it, or it could be a translation issue. In terms of, it's something like fear that we don't have another word for.
Because do we know? We don't know who wrote Spirit of the Daedra, do we?
We just know it was probably a Daedra itself.
Because I'm thinking it was Moloch Ball who wrote it.
Now I'm just picturing Moloch Ball at his death.
Well, no, like
with a pen,
bear with me.
kind of holding it in his fist.
Yeah. When you do the dolmens in ESO, and you listen to the things Moloch Ball says as you're closing the dolmen, or just before a boss shows up, he says certain things, and I'm looking through this. A lot of it is straight out of Spirit of the Daedra. It's perhaps you find me brutish, and how do you imagine I view you? When perhaps you find scamps comic and vermi brutish, then how do you imagine we view you humans? We serve by choice. We serve the strong. They serve me. That's what he says. We serve by choice. We serve the strong, so that their strength might shield us. Let's see. There was another part that jumped out at me. Oh, sometimes the prey turns upon us and bites us. It is a small thing. That's something he says. And then let's see. Sometimes I admire my prey and secretly applaud when it cheats my snares. That's in there too.
Yeah. Word for word.
That's part of the whole. That's part of the that Dremora's whole way of being almost, and again it goes back to Battlespire. The innocent quarry, who is to be respected and pitied and all this. It's a very, very formal way of thinking about it. If it's not really a thing that is what we would think of in terms of emotion, I don't think, but it's more performative, which is potentially something else. If you go with the idea of the Dremora must master fear to overcome it, again, it sounds like some sort of a ritual. So is it some kind of thing they have to do that's being translated for us in those sorts of terms, that they will have to act as if they are, or act in such a way that best translates as expressing this emotion, but there's no inner workings for it.
Makes you wonder what Daedra can be actually afraid of.
Yeah.
Loss of power.
Yeah.
The loss of self, possibly.
Yeah, actual mortality would be an easy one.
Yeah. As death to the mortal, so failure to the immortal, to splice 40k into this.
That's another check mark.
Well, we mentioned it earlier.
Oh, we did? Okay.
Has someone gotten bingo yet?
I just put a completed bingo card up in our.
Hey!
It's not bingo yet because I haven't said the Green Dragon's name.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's a free space. Never mind.
No.
Oh. Okay. Well, Dune. When? Oh, are we doing Dune?
It was mooted at some point, but.
Oh God, I'm totally unprepared for Dune. I could do a 40k cast probably, but I'm totally unprepared for Dune. That's like you need a higher grade of scholar than me, bro. That's yeah.
I gotta finish some Brandon Sandersons first before I tackle Dune. So.
That's rough. I don't know about that shit.
It's really good, but it is. There is so much, even in the first novel, which what is it, 800 pages or something. There's so much going. But it's magnificent.
Oh, another thing I just thought of. We were talking about the loss of self, about the Daedra. It basically harkens back and has a lot of similarities to Dragon Ren and the Dova.
I dig it.
Because Dova are afraid of, or they can't comprehend mortality either, because they're fragments of time. They've been existing since the dawn of creation.
Which that gives me the idea that dragons are to Daedra, such as Akatosh, as Dromora are to Daedric Princes.
Yeah.
Well, possibly, yeah. Because
I'm not keen on the relationship being that direct, because it still doesn't explain unaligned Daedra that well. But it's a start, because
if we're going strictly Anuic or Padamic, then
yeah.
Well, because not all Daedra were originally Daedra.
Yeah.
Because you have the Soul Shriven, you have the Daedric Titans, which were born from dragons. You have. It's probably a lot of other examples that I'm not thinking of right now.
Yeah.
You can become a Daedra just by someone yanking you off of Mundus and telling you, "Hey, you live in Oblivion now. Suck it up." But
or making an impression on Oblivion. I've just had a sudden thought that possibly the way that the texts like the Azure Plasm talk about being reformed in Oblivion out of stuff. Well, what's there to make that reformation? What's there to make that apart from if it's kind of your pattern, if you like, that it's your being is kind of an extension of I'm trying not to say forms, but I'm going to say it, of a form that's held in Oblivion to then remake you after you die. And to re-express that pattern again. Is that something that works? Because if you get dragged into Oblivion and make enough of an impact, enough of an impression on the place, then will you have that same kind of link to Oblivion? You're kind of carving out a literal dent in Oblivion that's U-shaped that will then spawn you at a future point.
And that goes back to fucking the Daedra thing about Daedras living on Mundus, because the vestige. That's literally the whole fucking point of the vestige. You're literally an anti-Daedra.
Yeah.
It's like I totally forgot about that. It's like if a mortal can basically become a Daedra in form but not by soul, then it shouldn't be too hard to take a Daedra and just be like, hey, I'm going to attune your essence to Mundus. When you die, you just reform here.
Yeah. Although then it gets the questions of what's the kind of stuff that's being made, because that text again talks about valence or valiance or something, which strikes me as being a type of substance, which is there an equivalent in Mundus?
Sky
yeah, I can see that.
Because I think that's the reason why you get reborn to Mundus, because when you first get broken out of Cold Harbor, the prophet's like, we have to reattune your soul and your nature of your being to Mundus, so you don't return to Cold Harbor when you die.
Yeah,
and that's why you had to go find a Sky Shard. Basically, you had to find something that's intrinsically linked to the idea of mortality in order to return to Mundus.
Yeah, and maybe that's what Daedric summoners do if they want to keep the Daedra here. That even when they die, so to speak, or even when they would die, if they're kind of cut off from their source and are maybe constantly dying, which is a really nasty thought as to why summoning is bad for Daedra. In that if it would be that you're dying and being reborn moment by moment because you have been realigned to Mundus for a certain amount of time before your Mimic then pings back to the Pole of Oblivion and you shoot back there when you die.
So you're basically installing the Lorcan update into Daedra. That's what Sky Shards are. What did they describe as that? They're like shards of Lorcan, or they're like fragments of Lorcan stuff.
I can't remember
what that is.
I
know they're.
The prophet calls it a
linked.
shard of Aetherius, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Well, I thought they had ties to Lorcan too.
I don't know. Maybe.
Are you thinking Heartstones from Skyrim?
No.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, damn it! I'm gonna go read fucking things now.
Nerd.
How terrible! You have to go and read about Elder Scrolls lore.
Yeah,
I
really.
stay so far away, and now you guys has got me back.
Yes.
Addiction.
Yes, come back into the fold.
When you were talking about how when they become a Daedra becomes bound to Mundus and that they keep returning to it. Here I go again with associations. It makes me think of Dark Souls and the possibility of going hollow. Which I'm not saying that.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I don't know. That might be going a little too far down that road, but it's a pretty darn fun road, I think.
Or kind of like Sekiro a little bit, with how you have the divine heir and how you have like someone link up to your contract of immortality.
Yeah.
So what's divine severance then?
See, you would
Cutting
bring
yourself
that up.
off from the heart of Lorcan.
Oh, maybe
Escaping the Kalpa,
saying fuck it to existence itself.
All right, Chris, what are you reading in the Dune Encyclopedia? I have to know.
Literally everything. Specifically, I was looking at the concept art that they had for still suits, which look completely unlike every movie or other rendering that's been done. They're like sort of like I don't know, like onesies. and also they have a biological dissection of the sandworms.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's juicy shit.
Elder Scrolls doesn't have sandworms.
See, that's why I was so on in Coda that the worms need to be sandworms. I know, it's not. It's Akatosh who's broken, or maybe dragons who are broken, but dadgummit.
Or possibly Vivek. Yeah. Here, for example, is the original concept of a spice harvester.
Nice.
Yeah, I guess.
Do they have ornithopters? Because I've always wondered what an ornithopter looks like. I've seen like 80 different versions.
Well, this is a carryall.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I can look up an ornithopter. I'll see what they have in here. I'm right next to the still suit, though, so I'm gonna get to that. Yeah, this is their version of a still suit.
Thoroughly off topic.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always off topic.
Yeah, what do they have for ornithopters? That's a good question. They always draw those differently.
I've seen everything from very much like a fly to like.
Ooh, well, that's a choice they could have made, I guess.
Well, the Daedra think they're stupid, but I don't think that's the same thing as hating them. They think they made the wrong choice. But yeah, that's not exactly hating. There's some ambivalence going on there, sure, because they're jealous.
Right.
They're quite obviously jealous. So I don't know if you can say there's definite hate and wanting them to never be. And it's quite plain they find Mundus a fun place to be. I mean, Sheer Gorath is all about that. But So I think hate. I don't think hate is a strong word. I mean, it's kind of. It's
a self-sustained, one-sided love-hate relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's also part of the tourism board. Mundus, it's a fun place to be. Xivkyn, spice is definitely an inspiration for moon sugar. I can 100% confirm that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, it's an inspiration.
The Anakin and Khajiit are Fremen.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a very strong connection with them, and then and also the Dunmer and Fremen in general are. I mean, I'm sure that I'm pretty sure in the Dunmer cast, I think we talked about the parallels between Morrowind, the Dunmer in general, and Dune and the Fremen. So I'm pretty sure we've covered that. But if we haven't, God, what's wrong with us? Because
no, there's a huge amount of Dune and Morrowind. I mean, like ridiculous amounts, as there should be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Morrowind's just doing the game.
Well, that and Dark Crystal, there was a lot of Dark Crystal. If you remember that article that was posted earlier last month, the Morrowind's original pitch was Dark Crystal meets Star Wars.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And there's a city called Dune. That's true. Yeah.
Having thoroughly derailed, did we want to talk about anything else?
No, we're pretty heavily
Daedra.
derailed here. I think we can wrap it up. Yeah.
I can't really think of anything.
No.
Yeah. Anybody got any ideas for the next cast? Throwing it out to chat too. Anybody in chat ideas for next cast?
Well,
Autobiography.
Well, if you're talking about souls in general.
Sure, could do that. Should we kind of do a little bit of thematic thing with the Khajiit, with the Elsewhere expansion coming out?
There's some Paraguay stuff coming in that.
Really?
That drops on the 20th, doesn't it? So we got about 2.5 weeks or so.
Yeah.
I'd also, mostly for my own self-gratification, I'd like to do a proper slowed cast, because I know we did the summer set, we talked a lot about the sea slowed, but we didn't talk about slowed in general.
Okay.
So that's mostly.
And that's bingo.
Well, good. We should definitely wrap it up there. I think. Let me think.
Xivkyn's mentioning Magnus.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
The next kind of big thematic arc that I was vaguely thinking in terms of scheduling was that we go through individual casts on each Etada. I mean, we've done some of them already.
Okay.
I mean, we've done Sheogorath and Talos, but the rest of them are all still up for grabs, I think. Oh, and Sithis has been done.
I think Michael and I would love to take on Magnus, especially when we start getting into the idea of cultures inspired by sun worship. We could do all kinds of stuff about that. And okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to turn around immediately after this is over and post one of the older casts onto Reddit finally. Thanks very much. Everybody wave goodbye.
Thanks for
waving goodbye, but you can't see it.
Okay. Those of you in chat, I'm going to drop a bingo card that you guys can save to your computer. So.
Yay!
What?
I'm hosting it on the Telmora, so I'll drop
Oh,
that
great.
There
it is.
You should just be able to click on the link there in chat. Yeah, Selectives Lorecast bingo.
All right. Tremendous. Bye, folks.
Brilliant. Bye.
Yeah, everybody.